Hello. Thanks very much for coming. There's nothing more superfluous at the moment than my comments, introductory or otherwise, about Lowell's amazing work. He has for such a long time, certainly for all of my professional lifetime, been amazingly respected and admired as a craftsman, as an artist, and as, of course, a cinematographer. But as we all know, his prestige and standing has just gone up a notch with his Academy Award nomination for the amazing film The Brutalist, which I'm sure you've either been to see or are, I would hope, going to see, because that's an absolutely amazing film. So, as I say, it is my pleasure and my privilege to be asked to moderate this event. So thank you very much for coming, and thanks very much, of course, to Lowell. Orgasmic, I think, is the only way I can describe that final image, which, of course, I think probably has now the distinction of being one of the great images, I think, of 21st century cinema. I think I've watched the movie many times, and I've played that clip in my head so many times. It was only recently that I realized, why am I so obsessed with that? And I realized the other day, I remember, it's because it reminded me of the first time I saw the ending of Planet of the Apes. That's why. Of course, it's the ending of Planet of the Apes. And I'm not being ironic. They both have the same effect of something is terribly wrong. Yeah. That's supposed to be upright. It's actually, and of course, right about now, with the presidency of Donald Trump, there can hardly be a more appropriate political image than the Statue of Liberty intended to welcome foreigners and immigrants being turned upside down like that. I mean, there can hardly be a more relevant avatar for the way we all feel at the moment. But tell me, what is your procedure in coming up for something like that? Did you have that idea, or did that evolve, or how did it come about?
It was very much an evolution. There was a version of this that Brady and I were discussing. We knew that the scene was going to end with the Statue of Liberty, but the Statue of Liberty is this incredible gift from France to the United States. If you're in the harbor and you're on a boat and you approach it, it is very arresting. But it's on an island, on a plinth. So in some ways it's kind of kept from you, and so if you were to just cut to a shot from the boat, for example, it wouldn't have that same arresting power. I had this kind of version of it where I said to Brady, what about if we were in the folds, if we were looking directly up and we were in the folds of the robe, so you're just within the cast metal, right, and you're in this thing, and we're sort of turning and twisting. Because Brady and I have always kind of like explored this idea of what we've now sort of recently sort of referred to as the untethered camera, so there are points right where the camera sort of liberates itself, and either gets, in Child of a Leader, gets thrown through the crowd. So I think we wanted this point where it was kind of like, well, what about if we don't know what this thing is, and as we sort of fold around, we suddenly start to see a face and the torch, and it unfurls itself, but it's right above you, Yeah. And so I had this idea, and then we were talking about, Brady liked that idea, and then we were like, well, how could we possibly do it? We'd have to get a techno crane on the island in New York, and then there are other versions of the Statue of Liberty. In Paris, there's a smaller version, So we were like, okay, well, maybe we do that, maybe it's almost like a model,
Did you use the French one?
Well, we certainly explored it, the idea. Right. And then it was prohibitive to do it. And then I think not only was it sort of prohibitive, I think the thing is there's a lot of money you had to commit a lot of money to do that, and I think Brady had to be convinced, obviously, that it was going to work thematically and stylistically. And so ultimately we went to New York after the shoot, and we had I think just a day filming other sections in The Brutalist as well, sort of landscapes of the Manhattan skyline and things like that. And we filmed on a long lens, the Statue of Liberty, and then very much editorially, it's this twisting, turning thing. Right. So it's really David and Brady that sort of very, very, very cleverly sort of had this idea of sort of, as you said, sort of liberty I mean, you're supposed to arrive into America and it's terra firma and it's solid and it's hopeful and it's resistant and all of these things. And the idea that it's sort of, for Laszlo in this film, and as you said, of course, very timely. I mean, this idea of it's just sort of like turning the world on its head and being, So that was how that evolved.
That's right. I mean, what I love about it is, of course, he's happy. Laszlo is euphoric and delirious with excitement to be in the United States, and yet we see a terrible premonition, a terrible message from the future that perhaps he shouldn't be, or that his arrival in the United States is much more complex and fraught than he realizes yet, and he's gone through an unimaginable horror. But what I love about it is you think, wow, is that what he sees from the boat? And of course, no, of course it's not. No. It's not a realist description of what he looks like, of course, because what you actually see from a boat of the Statue of Liberty, you would see it as everybody else sees it. You would see it from afar, or perhaps foreshortened, but you wouldn't, even if you were dazed or all at sixes and sevens, you wouldn't quite see it twisting upside down like that. So it's an amazing realist moment, which is not realist. It's surrealist or anti-realist. It kind of intuits the lead character's state of mind in an extraordinary way. How long did it take to shoot that scene? You were out there, I mean, because it must be very tricky because you're in the darkness, you're in the pitch darkness and out into the light. I mean, it couldn't be, the binary effect is so striking. Did it take a long time to shoot, or no more than anything else?
No, I think it was half a day. I think we were trying to think what else we were filming that day, but I think we started I mean, it takes some time to get all of the background cast organized and all that. And I've got a feeling that we in the morning we went and did something else and then came back, and I obviously pre-lit. There's not a lot of lighting, but what lighting there was, I pre-lit that space. I mean, what's interesting, I think, also is that in many ways this scene it sort of encapsulates the entire movie in some respects, and also mimics the institute that Laszlo builds. So in the sense that the institute is partly subterranean, so partly denied light and being, and then there's this kind of idea of some sort of ascension, or this reaching for the light and this celebratory. So not only does it start with this idea of confusion, disorientation, both for Laszlo and the audience, but by the end of it, this elated, celebratory kind of hope, and it echoes, so it echoes the Institute, which in turn, because when I was filming it, I didn't necessarily I didn't really appreciate the disorientation for the viewer, because I was aware of what it was, that we were supposed to be on a boat, the bowels of a ship. But, audiences now are like, well, I thought I was in Dachau. I thought I was in a concentration camp. So I think it's really interesting how it goes from, it tracks the journey in one scene,
It mimics the whole concept. It epitomizes the whole concept of an architecture of horror that's already been built inside Laszlo's mind, and we won't ever be aware of it until the very end. What the terrible punchline is that we're going to find out. I'm certainly not going to reveal it here for anybody who doesn't know. But certainly that architectural theme isn't simply a question of. It isn't simply a question of, look, here's a building and here's another building, and are they different? Are they similar? What is it like building one from the ground up? What is it like taking it from the drawing board to reality? It's about that structure that's already built inside his mind. That terrible structure, be it platform, be it prison house, be it cage, it's already been designed and built in his head, and he has to find his way out of it by designing something else.
Yeah, and yet the Institute, at the end of the film, there's a kind of revelation that the spaces within the Institute are identical in dimensions to the spaces that he had to inhabit in Dachau, and his almost kind of taking control back is to liberate the ceiling, is to remove the ceiling and have this idea of reaching and letting the light in, which I mean, if you didn't know by now, I get quite emotional. But no, when I watched the film again, at the end of that, I always get quite choked when there's this kind of where you finally have that understanding. You know, I find that very moving in the sort of the retrospective view.
Yeah. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your background in cinematography and your how you find your way into that vocation, should I say? How did you? Where you were born in the UK? You've already spoken about your conversations with your uncle about the image and framing an image and creating an image. When you went to school, did your mind start going in that direction? How did it work? When did you move towards film and cinematography?
Well, it's tricky having this with my parents here because they could contradict what I'm about to say. But
you can come up on stage at any time and say, no,
that's
wrong.
not true.
That's not true.
That never happened. Yeah. I do remember, a quick canter through would be it was art to photography to moving image to filming, and that's, educationally, that's my feeling about it. I do remember being a child and sort of traveling up the road home and sort of doing this. I do remember on occasion doing this and sort of seeing the world through a kind of rolled up fist. And I don't know, coincidental or not, but it's, obviously akin to looking through a lens. But I mean, I've embarrassed my parents with this before, because I think, my parents encouraged me to get an education, and I'm very appreciative of that, and to go to university and to study. But I honestly, in my heart, feel, and it comes back to what I was saying when we earlier on, the university introduces you to people, but also the technical and et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of this stuff about who you are and how you see the world and, whatever you're doing, so much of that, I believe, happens so early on, either through, films shot by Robbie or, just parental experiences as a child. And whatever that thing is, whatever that response to the world, I think is formed very, very early on. And I think university, I applaud it and cherish my time there and the people I met. But I don't think it's that is the be. I don't think it's not the be all and end all. There needs to be something else. You need to have experience, life experience, have something to say, and how you respond to the world as a person.
What were you studying? Were you studying cinematography or film at university?
Yeah, it was media production in Newcastle, and I didn't do very well in my A levels at all. So I had to do this kind of like art. Foundation course, and so that kind of introduced me to that was like audio visual studies. So I ended up doing that for a year, and then I actually I went for an interview at university, and they didn't accept me, and then I was I guess I was 18 or something, and then it was like the Easter holidays, and I went, oh bugger that, and I called the university and I said, no, you have to let me onto this course. And they went, oh, okay then. And I thought, all right, okay, the lesson learned. Do not take no for an answer.
Very good for the film industry, incidentally. And anywhere in life, yes, exactly.
But yeah, just, basically I went to university thinking I wanted to direct. I actually got, before I went to university, I got some experience. This is in Wales. So there's a little village called Llanrhaeadr and Mochnant, which is just down the road, and a film came to town, and it was The Englishman that went up a hill and came down a mountain. This Christopher Munger movie with Hugh Grant, Tara Fitzgerald, I think, and I got a job on that, and I remember there was a camera set up, this movie cam on a tripod, and they said, we're looking this way. Clear everything, meaning, like just grab anyway, I went straight for the camera, and they were very alarmed because they were, I had no experience
Yes.
and so they cut me off at the pass and didn't let me do. But I definitely, gravitated towards the camera, and so that was a kind of, I definitely liked it seemed bonkers. Like this is nuts. Like just as a way of kind of like, this is a career. Like it seemed beautiful, but it seemed like the circus or something. Like it was kind of extraordinary. I mean, I do remember this one point when the DP, who remained nameless, but it's a very nice looking film. But there was one point where Tara Fitzgerald and Hugh Grant were on a little hillock that they built on top of this hill. And he wanted to... We were waiting. I didn't know what we were waiting for. And they said, we're waiting for this. Basically, we want to shoot this profile shot of them embracing, but the sky is too bright. So we want to have this large piece of perspex, this neutral density perspex that's coming up from London, and they're literally going to push it in behind and bring this, like a pair of sunglasses on the landscape, bring that down and keep the exposure, so the exposure's more controlled between the two. And so we're waiting, and I'm on this hillside, and we look down, and there's this truck, Grip House, London, gate opens, comes all the way up like this, comes all the way up. Everyone's waiting, everyone's in position. The truck comes up, it goes round, circles back round this road that they carved up the hillside. It comes in, the tailgate drops. Everyone comes in, like all hands to the pump, 8 people. They get this huge piece of perspex, and they sort of, the camera's set up and it's waiting, and this perspex comes in, and it gets into position. We're all seeing ourselves reflected in this thing. And it doesn't stop. The perspex just carries on. Put it back on the truck, put it back on the truck. And it goes on the truck and makes its way back down. And I thought, wow, this is ludicrous. Like, I want that job.
That's amazing.
It was a very funny moment.
Very. So you got that. So you had that start when you like graduated at Newcastle. Did you go straight into movies or TV? Well,
so again, to this idea of how important university was. Film theory was very, very important. The technical was very, very important. But also Sam Haley, who may be here at the moment, I don't know, but he's definitely in town. Sam Haley was a student, as was Dwayne Hopkins. Dwayne and Sam went on. We did short films together at university.
Right.
And then they asked me to continue shooting, And so basically what happened was, this is like 97. So between 97 and 2005, I think it was, when I shot Ballast, the first film, I was in the industry and also shooting short films. And the reason for that was that we all have our own sort of path. And I realized it's not just about what you know or you think you have to say. It's about the confidence to express that.
Right.
And I didn't have the confidence. When the first time you're on set, you're in everybody's way. You're in a doorway. You're in the wrong place. And so university could never give me that. And it gave me a lot of stuff, but I needed to basically kind of like spend that time feeling confident enough to express. And so I was shooting short films, and then Love Me or Leave Me Alone, which was this cinema extreme anamorphic short that Sam and Dwayne were producing and directing. Lance saw this, Lance Hammer, beautiful Lance Hammer, saw the film, and I got a call out of the blue. I thought it was a practical joke, this American voice on the end of the phone. I was living in Whitley Bay in the northeast of England, which is not... It's lovely, but it's not the epicenter of filmmaking.
No. Whitley Bay is a lovely place.
I got this call at 11. I think, it was like 11 at night, and Lance said, "Listen, I have this film. It's my first film." And obviously I hadn't shot a feature at that point. And he said, it's Mississippi, it's available light, it's non-actors, it's 35 minutes. One or two of those I would have got on a plane with. There was 4 being offered.
Yeah.
And I stayed up till 3 a.m. and I read that script. And there was no way I wasn't going to shoot that film, And I got off. I got off the plane in Jackson, Mississippi, and Lance and I met for the first time. There was no Zoom at that point, and and so it was a real. It's interesting because Andre was talking about trust. It's about trust. The best stuff is about trust, and Lance trusted me, and that whole film was absolutely about trust. There was no storyboards, no shot listing. It was I trust you.
Right.
Let's do this.
Well, we're going to get on to Ballast in a minute. It's actually a little bit later on, but I want to get back to your very fruitful, obviously creative collaboration with Brady Corbet, and we're going to play in a clip from the childhood of a leader in a minute. But when did you first meet Brady? Did you think, wow, this is this amazing kind of partnership, obviously, that we know about these three movies you've made together? When did you meet him, and was there a kind of light bulb moment you thought, wow, actually this is, it's always something special, but this is something extra special when you met him?
So Rebecca, who is here, Rebecca, my agent, introduced me. She was she remains the reason that I have this relationship with Brady. I think his DP that he had lined up had stepped away for whatever reason, and I had this 2-hour conversation with Brady, and Mona was there also, and sort of in the background with Ada, their child, a babe in arms at that point. And we, pretty much after that 2-hour conversation, I was like, I'm good, I'm ready to do this, And I don't know if I think we kind of made that decision on the call. It's if we didn't verbalize it, then it was certainly felt in a very, very good place. And then basically, it's Brady's first film, and he was just very, very assured, He was just very, very assured very early on. And he is still a filmmaker that is very pragmatic, and he's across the budget in the best possible way. And he, as he would say, moves the sand around in the sandbox. So if somebody tells him, "Oh, we can't afford this," he knows why, and he knows if he wants it, where he can take the money from to make it work. Yeah. What's like often you'll work with directors, and like a case in point with the Brutalist, the Van Buren mansion. It didn't have a bedroom. There was no room that would really serve as a bedroom, and yet there were scenes in a bedroom in the script. Now, there's another scenario here where you can work with another director and you spend weeks looking for this unattainable location, or maybe you then come back to the first location and make it work, because you can be quite precious about your desires and designs for the film. Brady is like, well, I don't need a bedroom, it's fine, I'll just put it somewhere else, as long as, and it's the same across the board with the heads of department, as long as the intent and the theme of the scene remains intact, then he will cut his cloth, and find a way through it. And so that's how, the Brutalist was 33 days for like $10 million. That's one of the ways that you achieve that, is by just being smart and sensible.
Another great upside down shot. Not the last one we're going to have this evening by any means, but another great upside down shot. Again, looking at it now, you can see the classic three ingredients of fascism and demagoguery are shown in the young master at the very first of all, screaming in front of an audience, pretending to be angry and perhaps being angry, nurturing a sense of victimhood, classic kind of fascist bully thing of I am the victim here, and then of course violence. Again, watching that, I think the first time I saw that movie, I thought, my God, who is this director? Is it Visconti? Has Lucchino come back to kind of give us something else? Partly, of course, because the young leader, of course, does look like the kid in Death in Venice, of course. And again, you're creating an amazing interior scene with that amazing candlelit scene. The period design is great. It looks like it's very disturbing, because it's like a dinner party by Buñuel or something. It looks like The Exterminating Angel or something like that. Again, I'd just like to hear about what you did to set that up, and also your amazing intimacy with the actors as a camera, you've got to come right in, you know, the kid is going to assault his mother in the most shocking way, but you are right in their faces as well. You're right up in their faces as the camera lens is. It's almost the triangular implosion of violence and energy. It's Prescott and the mother and you. Yeah. So, what was it like shooting that scene?
It's got. I mean, this is the first film we did together, so I remember it almost like yesterday. Of where we were, you know, constructing that. I mean, it was a very technical scene. I mean, that's the first thing to say, you know. Right. And you know, it's the scene that precedes it is Prescott picking up rocks in the garden. So I think then it becomes a little clearer what she's being hit with, you know. But Brady is also someone who is not explicit. You know, there's you got to watch pretty carefully, you know. Like you don't get a stamp that says 6 years later or whatever it might be. No, you know, no. You have to really pay attention. And so this, for example, you don't see the rock in the hand, then the hit and things. No. So he, you know, Brady's. You've got to be quite, you know, you've got to be very assured in that regard to you know, feel that you're not missing vital bits for the audience, and the audience has to stay. You know, as I said, watch very closely. But I mean, that scene is, you know, very formal. You know, I think Brady's work has a sort of a formalism. It has a sort of maximalist, minimalist kind of quality, certainly in The Brutalist. Right. And so this was a scene that was obviously shot quite traditionally in terms of dolly moves and things like that, right, as opposed to handheld. There could be a version of this that had more handheld, but I think really at this point within this film, I think handheld often has a kind of modernity to it as well. And I think for whatever reason, I think our thought process was that this scene should, you know, it's a formal dinner party. Right. So the language of the film should remain formal. Okay, you know? Interesting. But then as you say, that the one moment that you're really up close is that moment. And I think, you know, just looking at it now and obviously, you know, looking at The Brutalist so closely recently, people have asked the question about sort of how does one, on the budget or the time frame that we have, how does one get this grandeur within the frame? I was thinking about it, and I think that we don't do this a lot. We don't do this framing a lot. So what I mean by that is that in the best sense of the term filmic or cinematic, we try to celebrate the space and the action at the same time, you know? So we're not, you know, there's often an argument, or there has historically been a conversation that between television and film, and, you know, you need to physically get closer to the subject in order to convey the same sense of emotion. You know, I think we sort of fundamentally disagree in some regards. That you know, so it's a bit like we were talking about it the other day, Brady and I. It's a bit like if you step into a room at a dinner party or something, if you speak to someone, you're not a foot away from their face. You know, you're experiencing the space and thing. And I think, you know, it's like in There Will Be Blood when the small child runs back into the arms of Daniel Day-Lewis's character.
Yes,
so
I can't remember.
And it's like they're this big, you know, but you get all the emotion of that moment. You know, you don't have to be right in the face. You know, right. And so I think it's that. I think that's part of the key for us. I think is to try and celebrate both space, Judy's design, and the performance. And I think that feels like it. That's how films were made, you know, and they continue to be made. But it's like if you think The Brutalist is a debt to a kind of 50s melodrama, for example, or to Hitchcock or whatever it might be. I think that's...
Well, apart from everything else, you've got that amazing figure of Bérénice Bejo, who's this amazingly charismatic and beautiful woman. And you've got that responsibility, in a way, as a cinematographer, of lighting her and framing her and presenting her, because... she's such an extraordinary figure, extraordinary performer. Rather unique, actually. I'm in a way, I regret not seeing her in more movies in some ways, because she's so good. Obviously in The Artist by Hazanavicius, and I think as much younger, she was in The Prisoner by Chantal Akerman. Yeah, it's an amazing person. But what you did with her was so good, because it's profoundly shocking. You're seeing this amazingly charismatic, beautiful person, and then you realize that she's been assaulted by her own son, and then everything untethers from there. Everything becomes obscene and dislocated and strange. And again, we've got that classic upside down, and you think, yes. Now, was that another eureka moment? Did you think, do you know what, it almost looks like a reflection, or it's what he sees, or what we see?
Well, it definitely came from Brady, that moment. I mean, and the way, Derek was working with me on the film, so he can attest to this.
Derek can talk about that,
the mechanics of it were would not pass a health and safety examination. No. It was a lot of sort of teetering, and also I think we took the pan handle of the camera that allows you to pan and tilt the camera head, and we had a rope attached to it. And it was kind of Heath Robinson.
Right.
It was definitely looked a little bit like that. But the scene that comes directly after this, I believe, is Robert Pattinson as the older Prescott.
Yes.
So it is a jump in time.
Yes.
It is the birth of this the rise of this fascist leader. So it has a very important place in the narrative. This upending and this and it does. Unofficially, the three movies are a trilogy in some respects. Brady has said this, and they share a language. Yes. So it's interesting, the sort of echoes.
The other thing, we were talking to Nina, where I was trying to find the moment. Sadly, I don't think we've got it in the clips, but there's an extraordinary moment in Child of a Leader where you see one of the servants accidentally set fire to a tassel. And you see it, and you almost think, oh my God, now what's going to happen? And it kind of burns out and nothing happens at all. You think, what did I just see? What on earth, what terrible catastrophe have we just missed? Yeah. That something terrible could have happened. And then after it's all over, you think, did I see it? Did I imagine that? Was that, we shouldn't be talking about it because we haven't had a chance to see it, but was that improv thing? Did that accidentally happen? Or do you think, wow, we've got a way of burning those tassels of the curtain so that they burn out? Safely.
No, exactly that latter description. It was hard to achieve.
It looks impossible to achieve. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it was designed. It wasn't designed. It was always designed that way, and it was executed that way.
Right.
And it's a Brady question, but it's like it's really. I think it's portent. I think it's the idea of that moment is this kind of portent of things to come.
Yes.
And this kind of the fire within the home, the domestic security, there are all sorts of things to kind of explore in it. But then, yes, the idea of this kind of fizzling out. And I suppose it's this idea of kind of, you think it's going to be one thing, and then it turns out to be something else. And it's you think you know where it's going as an idea.
And you think and then when it doesn't happen, you think, actually, did I even see it at all? Have I even seen it at all? Well, that's his fascist saluting arm he's broken, incidentally. And that's the awful truth. I think any of us who've had young children will know that awful moment. You think, do I give in to them? Do I do something like that? Am I the Neville Chamberlain in this relationship? Do as I say. It's horrible. It's not funny at all. But it's not funny one bit, but there is an awful symbolism. Again, he's broken his arm, and you see him later on in the sort of doing this with his arm, really. Yeah, and again, now that Elon Musk has revived the fascist salute, this film becomes horribly relevant to us all once again. But again, what an interesting series of camera movements as you're behind Liam Cunningham as he comes in. He discovers his wife and the journalist, and why are you here again? And he sort of comes in and manages to turn it around and says, I came round to wish you congratulations on your good news. And it's an amazing moment of, oh yes, I suppose I have got some good news, haven't I? Which his wife doesn't appear to know about, really. So you haven't discussed it yet. It's very strange. But you follow him, then you're out, you're following him round up the stairs, and you're behind with him. And so it's what the camera movement is doing, is investing in that awful tension which has its explosion. Is that what it was about when you did that? Did you have to choreograph those camera movements? I suppose what I'm asking is, were you in rehearsal with the actors in a way before you did that?
I think this was the first day that we had Tom Sweet, who played Prescott. I mean, he never acted before, really. I think he was found by Des Hamilton, casting director in the UK, playing football, and he sort of went up and, and we lucked out with Tom. Yeah. This is an interesting clip because it illustrates a point about Brady. I said about him being assured, as a filmmaker. Now, I think just before this, I'd shot 45 years with Andrew Haigh. And Andrew also, in 45 years, there's a lot of kind of scenes playing out in single shots, and things like that, Now, partly as a DP, you have a little bit of an editorial head on your shoulders, because you're trying to, you want to come away with the shots for the scene, knowing that they cut together. I'm not an editor, but I have to be, everyone has to be aware of that it's going to editorially cut together. Now, we were shooting that scene, and, Brady, I knew Brady wanted to do it all in one take, and Attila Pfeffer, who you saw earlier, beautiful Attila, is like a knight in shining armor. He's like a fighter pilot of a camera operator. He was the Steadicam. Right. He was the Steadicam operator on that. And Brady was like, I want to start with what the audience thinks is a dolly shot, is a locked off shot. But then when Liam comes forward and comes to the stairs, and then when he goes back to the kitchen, up we go and follow. And that's what, so then it's like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. And then it has to be Steadicam, because you could have done that on a dolly, tracked around. But then obviously we go up the stairs, so that has to be that kind of forced our decision on the Steadicam. But we did rehearse it, absolutely. And as I said, it was the first scene with Tom, so it was ambitious. And I don't think we had a full day. I think we had the best part of a day to achieve it. But Brady was like, this is the shot, and I was like, okay. And then we did a few takes, and then I said to him, Brady, listen, do you think we should just do one version where we lead, somewhere you can get the scissors in, somewhere where editorially you're able to cut to something else. So you get, if you're not having to get that one take correct all the way through, Yeah. And Brady took me to one side very, very elegantly and said, I only want to cut to another shot if it gives the audience more information. And I was like, job done, off I go. And it's my job often, because the director has so much going on, and you think, if you're seeing something, then draw your attention to it. But, you don't press a point. You don't say, first-time filmmaker, you don't know what you're talking about. You give them the benefit of the doubt, and it's not my position as a DP to be the one that the director is having a confrontation with. You know, like that doesn't really doesn't serve a purpose. And there's also, as I said to you last night, I don't remember who it was, but this a director was quoted as saying, "Every cut is a lie," which I think is a fantastic.
I looked that up last night. It's been attributed to different people, actually. I think it was said by the Canadian filmmaker Wolf Koenig, I think.
Right.
But it's also been attributed, I think wrongly, to Goddard. I mean, probably sort of said, the truth is 24 cuts per second, but every cut is a lie. Actually, I think that is a mangled version, a garbled version of what Goddard actually said. I don't think, I think it was Wolf Koenig.
Okay, interesting,
I'm very interested in what you say, because there's I'd love this anecdote to be true, about a famous disagreement between a cinematographer and a director when Stanley Kubrick was making The Killing, is that Kubrick, of course, the great man, set up all the lights and all the camera positions, and they sort of went for lunch and came back to find his cinematographer, Lucien Ballard, had changed them all. And there was a sort of terrible silence.
My goodness.
And Kubrick said, why have you changed all my camera positions, Lucien? And Lucien said, the deathless line, Stanley, I didn't think you cared. I didn't think you minded, really. And there was a sort of Krakatoa. Don't tell Stanley Kubrick that he didn't care about it.
Amazing.
But you've never had anything like that with any of your directors? You've never had a kind of Stanley Kubrick, Lucien Ballard moment?
Yes.
You have? Oh, okay.
Yes. Interestingly, Lance Hammer, dear friend, when I wasn't, okay, so this is the thing. So when I got that call and I was living in this coastal town and he invited me to Mississippi to say, much of the call and much of my sort of thrust of my persuasion, was Lance was like, I don't want the circus, okay?
Yeah.
Meaning, I don't want the lighting truck. I don't want the thing. Like, we were looking at Dardenne Brothers films. We were looking at Breaking the Waves.
Right.
Breaking the Waves was really instrumental.
Right.
Available light, right? Oh, I'm the available light guy, right?
Yeah.
And I'd shot these we shot Love Me or Leave Me Alone was an anamorphic short film. The rental company was like, you cannot shoot anamorphic wide open. Why not? And we did, and then it's so of course you can do these things, but there's these kind of like tried and there's sort of like these, rather old-fashioned ways of kind of seeing things. Anyway, so I said, I'm yes, available. Oh, the circus, of course. Oh God, I don't know. And so I turn up in Mississippi, and my gaffer, I had a gaffer, and I mean, given that we weren't supposed to have any lights, it's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, the gaffer, maybe this is why he walked off, but he walked off a few days before filming. So in a panic, we were actually all living in this hotel in Canton, Mississippi, where John Goodman, the scene with John Goodman with Dapper Dan in Oh Brother Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
It was the same thing. It was this old brothel hotel, like it was it was an extraordinary place. Anyway, the production office, and we were staying in there. I got up in the morning at 7 a.m, an absolute blind panic because I didn't have my gaffer or any lighting booked or whatever. So I got online and I said, I found this company in Florida that had this lighting truck. It was called a load carrier. Now, a load carrier is Jenny with some room for lighting. And I was like, well, great. That'll be smaller and I'll have everything I need because I don't need a lot, but I need some insurance policy,
Yeah.
And so this 3 days later, this truck drove up from Florida. And then I'm in the production office, and I get a tap on the shoulder. Lol, can you just come out for a moment? The lighting truck has arrived. Oh, very good. I went outside to see this behemoth of a truck. And I was just absolutely, I knew that Lance was going to absolutely go, blow a fuse at this thing. And so, first day of filming, we're on set in these cotton fields in Mississippi. Okay, so we're looking this way, and then can we move this truck? Yes, Lance, yes, we can move the truck. No. We never really use it. At the end of that first day, we all said goodbye. The truck went off. It turned a corner and tipped into the ditch on the edge of the... So 3 hours later, we're all stood there trying to get this truck out that he never wanted in the first place.
He never wanted it in the first place.
So he's having to contend with the circus. So I'm like... it's my first film. I'm like, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get sent home.
Having promised him the opposite.
I wasn't very good at lighting. At all. I just hadn't really had any experience because we didn't really do it on Sam and Dwayne's films. Right. But we were working with, African American actors in dark locations. I didn't want to be completely at the mercy of not being able to light or balance exposure and this thing. And basically, the short story is every time I put a light up, I'd come out. Where's my light gone? Oh, Lance took it down. So,
okay.
And every time I lit one scene in the movie, and it looked terrible. And so he had this book of Polish documentary photography, and he would recalibrate me every night. We'd go back to the hotel. He'd go, "This is what I'm talking about." Okay, so I learned to not lie on that film. And interestingly, no, I was just going to say that I realized on that film, and that when you're employed as a cinematographer, you're often employed to not do anything, but to recognize. It's not about opening the truck and getting all the lights out and imposing. It's about knowing when to leave something alone and recognize what's there. And I think that's come a full circle for Robbie, and they're very much the kind of heart of my work, I think.
Right. Such a dramatic introduction to the giant title in sans serif. I always like a big title moment. I think that was great. It's like an epiphany for the kid. It's an epiphany for us because it starts us with that moment of awe and wonder in a way. And you've got those two shots of him looking at the birds coming up from the fields, and then a kind of cut in closer. But the audio is continuous to create that sense of almost dreaminess. Yeah. Is that something that? Was that pure serendipity? You thought, let's go out in the field and see what happens? Or did you think, no, we've got to wait all day for those birds, or something like that? Well,
no, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this clip just for a number of reasons. One, because I think it's probably an image editorially and photographically owes the closest debt to Breaking the Waves in some regards. I think there's this kind of like jump cut, which I always really loved the editorial idea. And also it's the one scene that people remember from the film. I mean, Ballast continues. I still get employed based on the work I did on Ballast, and as Rebecca has always said, it's the gift that keeps on giving. She said, when the movie came out, and it really is. I mean, it has such a place in my heart. But that scene was an interesting one because the idea, what was on the page, I believe, was Jim Myron's character was. These are snow geese that are migrating. So they're basically snow geese that are making their way north, but they feed and rest in these cotton fields, presumably because they're plowed and blah blah blah. But so the idea of the scene was that moment at the end of the small kid in the watching the snow geese, but we had to creep up on them. So we had a car. So basically,
startle them.
So we had a car with a sound recordist, a camera assistant, myself, Jim Myron, he's now a grown man with his own kids, which is remarkable. But beautiful Jim Myron and Lance, and we would turn. There's a field so we'd turn up like this, and then we would have to sort of creep across the field. Now, the ridges of a cotton field are like this, right? And we were going the wrong way across them, And so I'm with a handheld camera, and I've got the belt around me, And Jim Myron doesn't have a camera, and he's a lot younger than me, right? So he's, obviously faster than me. So basically, we creep up to the idea was that we were supposed to just creep up and then shoot them when they were in position. So I turned the camera on in anticipation. So what you see with me running erratically was never supposed to be in the movie.
Oh,
that was just supposed to be the moment that we arrived, so we were turning at that moment. And you can feel me breathing at the end of that take. Yeah. And so I kind of wanted to use it as a way of illustrating to the audience, today, just to be like letting the accidental in and letting or not being fixated with the blueprint, but allowing the allowing the world in, and I think I had no idea that really. I mean, it would have felt incredibly chaotic. When I saw the dailies, I'd be like, well, this is a mess, But it is that idea of kind of like it's all about context often, and the audience just goes along with it, and I thought it was a nice way of illustrating that.
Yeah. I want to jump forward now for no other reason that you were telling me last night. Your experience working with Bob Dylan, basically. I'd like to. I just want to ask you about it because it gives us a chance to hear your experiences with Bob, and also your impersonation of Bob Dylan as well, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the other thing about. But can you tell us, how did you come to be working with the great Nobel laureate?
The reluctant laureate. So there were 2 episodes. One I shot with John Hillcoat, an episode of Black Mirror in Iceland, and then at the end of it, he said, "Oh, I have," because he'd already worked with Bob a little bit, and he said, "Oh, I have this thing in Ireland. I don't know if you want to do it, And I said, "Of course I want to do it, And he was like, "Well, he's tricky, he's really tricky, and he's, not unpleasant, but he basically like pull the rugs out. He'll pull the rug out from underneath you,
Right.
And so we ended up turning with Derek. Also, we were in. We were in, I think it was Ardmore Studios outside of Dublin, which is a kind of small studios, but it's where they do Game of Thrones and things like that. And we turned up on a weekend, and we did a pre-light, and then we knew the schedule, and when, so I pre-lit this set, and it was supposed to be like an intimate sort of series of songs with his band, and and it was supposed to be like almost kind of like the front cover of the Basement Tapes or something, like in the Big Pink. It was supposed to be like a rug on a floor corner, like corner of a studio kind of thing. So we set this thing up, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, countdown to Bob arriving," and then suddenly he was there in the corner of the room in the shadows of this thing, and it was like the fire alarm went off. It was just like everybody out, and he was there with a hood over his, and he turned up early to catch us out, I guess.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but just to that's how he operates, and so we all kind of got taken out of the equation. And then we were around the dining bus, and we were like, we kind of knew the shit was going down a little bit, And there was like, we heard, "Oh, it's too bright. It's too bright. Everything's too bright." I was like, "Oh, it's my fault." So John come to the studio? "Oh, John's going to get some." John goes out, and then can Lol come to the studio about 20 minutes later? And I was like, "Oh God," And so I go, all the lights I turned up, and none of the crew were there because we'd all, and everything had just been turned off. I guess they pulled the switch, and it was in darkness, and all I could see was John and Bob at where the cameras were, and I went over, and John had to manhandle, had to physically get all 5 cameras in to Bob, and Bob's there, and he said, "I guess this is a master shot," and he's like performing in front of the cameras, and John's trying to like frame this thing, and try and do this stuff, and it was just suddenly me and John and Bob in this thing, and it was like, and then basically it was like, "Well, I don't like this, it's too dark, this is now how we're going to do it," and I was like, and then you have like an hour to do it, right? So Bob goes away. So like, shit. So then like we had an hour to relight this thing. And then apparently Bob was then, with his manager, Jeff, they were kind of like, did a tour of the studio. And they were like, and Bob's like, "Well, what do they shoot here?" And he's like, "Well, they do Game of Thrones. Can I have a sword?" And so they find this props guy that's like there on a Sunday doing some painting with his cigarette, and then they get the sword from Excalibur, the Boorman movie, and then so the whole thing had this like the piano had a sword on it, and it was just like this really, really random idea, and it was like, of course you can have a sword.
It's a marvelous thing to think Bob Dylan wielding King Arthur's sword. Who else is going to be able to pull that thing from the stone other than Bob Dylan? That's marvelous. Yeah,
absolutely amazing. And that was the first incarnation, and then I was lucky enough, Alma Haral, Shadow Kingdom, which was this during COVID. It was this online reworking of his songs, and one of them kind of, we shot the visuals for that, so one of them kind of looked like a Peck and Pa bar scene, and another was, then we were supposed to like recreate the juke joint of like an old juke joint of Silvio's in Chicago from, there's famous photos with sort of Howling Wolf, I think, and so we recreated that, and then Bob came out, and he was like, "No, this isn't what I want. I want it." And so that all kind of went south, and we managed to wrangle it back round. But he was extraordinary. I didn't obviously see him write music or record music, but I got a real insight, I think, into this mercurial kind of. It's like kind of feels like someone who doesn't necessarily know what they want in that moment, but absolutely knows what they don't want, And so it's interesting because it is this process of kind of finding it. And it's the same with film in a sense. If you're fine, there's a lot of people will roll their eyes, you know, if you're there finding it. No, do your bloody homework. Don't find it. Write it down. Do the shot list.
Yeah.
But there's a beauty in the finding it, you know, that you can't preempt and you can't, you know, otherwise 2 weeks earlier when you're shot listing or storyboarding it, that's the limit. If you're going to adhere to this, you know, it's like the Robbie quote about, you know, what's the point in just shooting the script, you know? That would be my point of view on it.
Thank you very much. What we're going to do now, I hope, is I want to move on to a very different movie, Andrew Haig's 45 Years. For those who haven't seen the film, of course, Charlotte Rampling's character is discovering evidence of her husband's previous emotional entanglement, which has come back, and it's almost like a ghost story. I mean, that appearance is like a sort of almost like a supernatural ectoplasmic visitation from the past. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Must be very difficult to shoot. Again, it's about darkness and light. I mean, it's so dark, and then you have these images which are fiercely bright, and yet they are cloistered as well, and again, intimate, disquieting. Again, it must be very difficult to film in what was it looked to me like a real house, not a set, but perhaps I'm wrong. No,
it's kind of, there's a couple of reasons I wanted to use this clip, but there was conversation about, you know, I tend to work a lot in real locations. I have obviously worked on sound stages where sets are built and designed and built. However, you know, in this film, it was like, oh, well, obviously we have to build an attic, make it bigger, and make it more accessible. And we went down a road with it, didn't actually get built, but was designed. And then we were like, you know, we were shooting 35mm Panavision cameras, which aren't small, you know, and you only have a 1,000-foot mag on and things like this. They're kind of quite big and hard to get into an attic. But we did. We actually used the attic in the, I believe we used the same attic in the house, you know, so it was and it was tricky, but I actually really, both metaphorically and literally, like to get painted into a corner as a DP. I'm not somebody who enjoys the design process in the sense of like, oh, well, I can put a hole in this and have a camera here. No. I'm much more like, I imagine like Robbie Ryan or someone like that. The idea is like, if you give me the space and these are the colors and the actors, then I will respond, you know, and I fire much better that way than having autonomy and being able to remove walls and things like that. I just prefer a lived-in space that has a history, and then I sort of respond to that.
Right.
And I also feel that the way the scene was shot, you know, Andrew directed it, was very economic. You know, that idea of having, you know, denying the close-up and just having the foreground and the back. I just think it was a really clever design on Andrew's part of shooting in that way. And the fact that it's each moment is a revelation. And I was watching it thinking, are we zooming in? Did I zoom in? And I don't think we did, but I feel that I'm being drawn in.
Like
so it's kind of
like
interesting. And I was like, oh,
screen.
is this frame getting tighter?
Yeah.
And then the last thing I suppose is. I'm a huge fan of Nick Rogue's work. You know, he was a cinematographer, BSc member who became a director. This film, in some ways, reminds me of Don't Look Now. It's, you know, Don't Look Now it's a ghost story or it's a supernatural story, but it's about grief. Of course, nothing is happening other than in the mind of two grieving parents, you know, and I think it's really interesting in that. I think there's some of that in this. You know, it's like it is a ghost story. But it's just she's haunted by what could have been, you know, because they decide not to have children, and they have this conversation, and they said, and they'd made this agreement, and then to discover that he did have a child with someone else. I mean, she tragically died, but you know, it's that revelation, and it just it spins you out of control psychologically. You know?
Right. I'd like to move on. I'm conscious of the fact we also need to leave a little space for the audience to comment as well. So if I could ask, please, for not the next clip. It breaks my heart, but I don't think we can use the Vox Lux clip because we're out of time. But the reason why I think that should be our last clip is because that's, again, it's a terrific movie. White Noise. You can stream it now on Netflix, but it's a shame not to see it on the big screen because that's the colors and the tones are so amazing. It's the movie that I think brings us closer to what I think of as the Wim Wenders, Robbie Muller kind of nexus. I mean, there's so much there that's a continuation of their filmic language, but an evolution, not simply a reproduction of it. But it feels like, Lars Eidinger as the sinister drug dealer, Mr. Grey. I mean, he is a great German actor that always supplies the edge. He's the grit in the oyster. He's like Bruno Ganz or Klaus Kinski or something like that. And of course, well, how can I say it is what I think of as a Euro-American feel. It feels European to me, but it's very American. It has the motel, neon motels. I mean, that's something I think is very Wenders Muller kind of that. Robbie Muller saw that, and he brought that distinctive European perspective to Americana and made it something else. And so, when you were working on that, were you conscious of that, and what was going through your mind when you were shooting that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Noah and myself are obviously big fans of Robbie's cinematography, but also his Polaroids. Like,
right.
Noah has, a lot of his books, collections of his Polaroids, and yeah, it was that contrast. But I mean, color was so important. The conversations of the contrast between the greens and the reds, but also this, having the rain and having the image obfuscated in some way. Like, I remember at one point on White Noise, I had worked with Noah before, so we were kind of finding each other and finding the material. There was one scene where the Gladneys, I believe, the
Gladneys,
family,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They arrive at the Boy Scout hut as some sort of evacuee sanctuary, and it was a tight schedule as ever, and there's a perspective where they're sort of like Rafi's character is sort of seeing the world through the rainy. And sort of Todd Hido is a photographer I really love, and he shot a lot of stuff through car windows, and it's been sort of obfuscated. The image is obfuscated and it has this dreamy quality. And I grabbed the camera and I said, look, let me show you this. And I jumped in and shot, said, just drive the car through, And I did this kind of wrap around, and he loved it, And I think it's also, not only is it that kind of an example of that kind of being alive to the moment and seeing something that you feel helps tell the story, but it also just, I think it's part of that same aesthetic, and that sort of motel exterior and things like that. And it definitely owed a debt to, for sure. It was very much in the conversation, Robbie and Wim's work.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's an opportune moment for us perhaps to bring the house lights up a little bit and to ask if anybody in the audience has got a question they'd like perhaps to ask Lowell. Do we have? Oh yes, the gentleman down here, right in the front, with a white sweater.
Thank you for the presentation. After going through a lot of the career, I'm sorry to ask you such a precise technical question, but I'm just wondering, going back to the Brutalist, was there much arm twisting required or much expense in getting VistaVision stock produced? Or was that something that they were excited to do? Kodak, I presume.
Yeah. So basically, for those that don't know, VistaVision is a format from the 50s, and Hitchcock certainly used it on films like Vertigo and North by Northwest, I believe. It's still 35 mil though. This is what maybe some people misunderstand, but it's a 35 mil. It's still the same film stock that you would shoot 2 perf, 3 perf, 4 perf, and pull the film down vertically, which is how the film travels through a motion picture camera. With a stills camera, the film is pulled horizontally, like 8 perfs across. And so that's basically what VistaVision is doing. It's taking the 35 mil and it's twisting it like, pulling it through horizontally. So you end up with over twice the neg area, So really, in terms of the cost, the cost increase is really that you have half the amount of film to shoot with, you know. So no, not really. There wasn't that much arm twisting. I mean, Brady, you know, Brady's third film, he's shooting film, and now I want to shoot VistaVision. So it was just accepted, you know. It was. What's that? No, it's, I mean, it would do if it was purely a photochemical finish. And by that, I mean, you know, we with this movie and the other movies, we do a DI, a digital intermediate. So basically, all the film is scanned, and then the image comes in, and presumably, I mean, I'm not in editorial, but presumably that image is, you know, on its side, and so digitally is corrected and is rotated and then cut, and it's all the same aspect ratio. It's all framed for 1:6:6, even if the neg area that you're exposing is a different is a different image. So no, for us it didn't complicate it.
Are there any other?
Hi, Peter and Lowell. Thank you so much. It's great 2 hours with you. Lowell, looking at your clips, one question that I kept asking myself was how you determine who the camera is, and by that I mean what the camera was doing in Ballast when you're running after the birds, and the shot we just saw there when you're slightly down low and you tracked across and then you pushed in, whereas in the film where you just parked up and letting the action run, and so the camera's a different person in each time, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, the placement of where does one place the camera, and how does one move the camera, and how do you make those decisions? I mean, I think it's, you know, it's obviously a conversation directly with the director, and they may have, you know, certainly Brady has very clear ideas about how he wants the camera to move within a scene. But, you know, it's an obvious thing to say, but it's motivated by, obviously, by the story and how, you know, I mean, the biggest distinction is handheld, which I love. I love operating handheld to the point where I often have to stop myself that I'm not doing it just because I love doing it, that it serves the story, you know, in that moment, you know. I mean, obviously there's a real intimacy. I mean, certainly with something like with the Brutalist, we've spoken about this kind of maximalist, minimalist idea. I think successfully, I hope, you know, you have these VistaVision vistas, the clues in the title, you know, like the Carrera marble quarries, but then within the same movie, you also have this kind of intimate sort of dance and back and forth, an interplay with the handheld camera, with the actors, you know. So I mean, it's very considered where we place the camera and how we move it, but a lot of it is kind of, like I said earlier, at the very, very beginning, it's almost kind of an instinctual thing. It's kind of, you sort of feel it, you know, and if the other person doesn't feel it, whether it's the actor or the director, then it's a conversation. But I think the process for me is that you see this, you know, it's a fairly traditional process in that the director will spend time with the actors, they'll block the scene, and I will be there, sort of waiting in the wings. Sort of, I don't tend to get involved too early. I tend to sort of just hear and listen and see, and then eyes turn to me, and then I'm like, well, that's great, but could we maybe do this? And what about if they put, you know, or what about if we develop a shot or whatever? So it's really that kind of process and just feeling it, I suppose, and yeah, just responding and just some scene. I mean, certainly this is an interesting one. Maybe in Ballast, but Lance was like, "Oh, here's an idea. Why don't we?" When Lawrence shoots himself at the beginning, when he is in the hospital and not moving, the camera is not permitted to move. So, you know, we're seeing him, and the camera is, you know, in the hallway on a set of sticks, watching him. When he's back on his feet again, you know, and he's back in society, you know, then we're handheld and we move with it. So that was an interesting way of illustrating that. It's like very much motivated by the performance, and it is really Lawrence's story in many ways. So he kind of he tethers and untethers the camera, if you like.
I think we've got time maybe for one more question. I'm conscious that we don't want to overrun too much in the venue, but one more, yes. I think. Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for the talk. It was really, really interesting to listen to. And my question would be, is there maybe where do you get your inspiration from? Is it just other movies, photography maybe, or do you also, besides these kind of like relating fields, of course, have some inspiration that you want to shoot a certain frame, or you say, okay, why not do it a different way or like an alternative way that you usually don't see in cinema?
Wow. Where does that come from? I mean, yeah, certainly. I think, Brady and I don't tend to. I don't think we've ever really done with this with a director, and I know that some directors do, and so I'd like to do it at some point. But when you start a project, there are certain films, Douglas Sirk and Hitchcock come to mind when I'm thinking about this film that I shot for Alex Prager recently, who's a photographer, and it was her first film. That's the closest I've come to sitting down and watching whole films as inspiration for stuff. A lot of the time with Brady, it's photography and painting. It's probably more photography and painting than films in some regards, But it's interesting because I think, I said that The Brutalist is kind of a 50s melodrama, as Brady has kind of described it. There's definitely a kind of I think that film is a balance between a kind of those aesthetics of those like 1950s, 60s kind of movies, but also a certain naturalism, So it's like it's not aping that that genre of films too much, We're trying to do our own thing with it. But you only see like Emma Laird character going around the showroom in that, and the way her hair is and the outfit, and then the sort of the Venetian blinds casting this noirish kind of like even that wasn't really intentional. The blinds were just a way of being like, we didn't want to see the outside world, so how do you deny seeing that in the shot? Well, if you put shears up, if you put curtain, like shears that would allow the light through, it dictates the quality of the light, which is no good for me because I want control over the quality of the light. So if you have Venetian blinds, you can then decide when you open them, when you close them, how you do it. I know I'm slightly deviating here from your question, but I'm trying to just illustrate that point. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I'm always going to unfortunately have to give you a slightly woolly answer in terms of the instinct, the intuition, the heart, whatever that is. It's one of those weird things you can't sort of like, you don't want to poke at too much, and and it's kind of, you just hope that it exists, and you know what I mean. The reason I say it is that that's the thing that kind of I rely on that, in terms of how the camera is moved, how I should light a scene, how we frame a scene. It's an intuitive thing often in the moment, and so it's like I don't really work too much from a blueprint,
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is where we're going to have to call it a day. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the IFFR for giving us the space to have this conversation, certainly to Andrea, but also, ladies and gentlemen, could we please put our hands together for the man of the moment, please, Mr. Lol Crawley.